The space station was cold and quiet. Many races from around the galaxy walked through the steel corridors. Tall ones with glowing eyes, short ones with heavy armor, and some who floated above the ground. In the middle of this strange place there was a metal hall. The hall was large and full of noise. It was not a market for food or machines. It was an auction for living beings. Slaves. Inside a cage made of strong light and cold metal sat a woman. Her skin was gray and marked with scars. Her eyes were full of pain, but she did not cry. She sat like stone, silent and still. The aliens looked at her like a broken toy. One with sharp teeth laughed and said, "She is no use, she is broken." Another with 3 arms said, "Too old, no power left." They walked past her without care. She had no name here, no voice, no value. She had lost everything. Her home, her people, her child. Now she was just a number in the auction. The alien host called her Lot 32. No one made a single offer. The room was ready to move on to the next slave when the doors opened. A human entered. He was tall and looked tired. His uniform was old and dirty with a patch that said Earth Defense Force. His name was John, but no one here cared. Humans were rare in this part of space and not always welcome. He walked slowly to the cage and looked at her. The woman did not look back. She thought he would walk away like the others. But he did not. He stood there for a long time just watching her. The auctioneer asked, "Do you want to bid, human?" The crowd laughed. John did not laugh. He reached into his coat and pulled out something small. A silver coin with the mark of his home colony. He placed it on the table. "This is all I have," he said. The crowd went silent. They thought it was a joke. The auctioneer said, "She is not worth even that." John said, "She is worth it to me." The auctioneer looked confused, then angry. "You cannot return her," he warned. John nodded. "I do not plan to." The woman in the cage finally looked up. Her eyes met his. For the first time in years, someone looked at her with no hate, no fear, no pity. Only kindness. John pressed a button and the cage opened. The light disappeared and the metal bars pulled back. She did not move. She waited for pain or a trick. But John only stepped back and said, "Come on, let us go." Slowly she stood. Her legs were weak, but she walked out of the cage. The crowd said nothing. They only watched. A human had just bought a broken alien mother with his last coin. For no reason. No logic. No reward. Just one simple act. As they walked away, someone whispered, "Fool." John heard it but did not stop. She walked beside him without chains, without force. He looked at her and said, "You got a name?" She shook her head. He said, "Then take mine. You are Mara, now Mara Turner." She blinked like the word was strange and soft at the same time. No one had spoken her name in years. Now she had one again. And it was not stolen or given by a master. It was shared. They reached his small ship and entered. Inside it was quiet and old but safe. John gave her a blanket and some water. She held the cup like it was treasure. John sat down and closed his eyes for a moment. He did not know why he did what he did. Maybe he saw something in her. Maybe he saw someone. Maybe he just got tired of watching good people get thrown away. Whatever it was, he had done it and there was no going back. Outside in the shadows, a black ship floated. Its scanners locked onto them. A message was sent through the stars. Target reacquired. Prepare for retrieval. Inside the ship, Mara opened her eyes. Something felt wrong. Far away, something dark was moving closer. But for the first time in forever, she was not alone. And that changed everything. A small hand held hers once long ago. Warm, soft, full of trust. That memory came like a whisper while she slept in the dark ship. The blanket was rough, the air cold, but still it was the safest place she had been in years. In her dream, her child laughed, chasing colored lights on their home planet. There were trees with silver leaves and skies that glowed purple at night. She was a soldier then, but also a mother. Protector. She had a name, once a title, songs written about her. Then the war came. Then the fire came. Then the silence. She woke up without a scream, but her fingers trembled. John was in the pilot's seat watching stars pass through the window. He saw her move but said nothing. He had learned already that quiet was safer than questions. She walked to the small window and looked out. Stars like fireflies floating in the black. John offered her food, but she shook her head. He did not ask again. She looked at a photo taped beside his controls. It was old, faded, but showed a little girl smiling in front of a garden. Mara pointed at the photo and said, "Soft voice girl, yours?" John nodded yes. "She gone," he said. "Long time ago." Mara looked at him, then at the photo. She whispered, "Same." He understood without more words. Pain speaks a language all its own. John started the ship engines and said, "We leave the station in 6 minutes. Need to go far before they realize she gone." Mara turned to the small mirror on the wall. Touched her face. The bruises were fading, but not the hollow in her eyes. She said, "My name." John looked over. She shook her head. "I mean before. I do not remember it. I do not want it." She turned slowly and said, "I keep Mara. If that all right?" John smiled small and nodded yes. That night the ship shook once like a bird hit mid-flight. John jumped from his chair, checked the screen. Small trace of a tracker signal on their hull. They had been marked. Mara felt it in her bones. "They coming," she whispered. "They always come back." John turned off lights, lowered ship power. Floating silent now between cold stars. He said, "Tell me, why are they chasing you? You were left in a cage like garbage. Why hunt garbage?" Mara sat down slowly on the floor, her back against the wall. She closed her eyes. "When I was taken, I thought I was last. But I heard something in the prison ship. Screams in a voice I knew. My daughter. Not dead, not free. Used for something. Experiments, weapons." Her voice broke for a second, then returned cold. "They used her to control others. She's strong. Half them now. Half machine, half pain. They need me because I still control a part of her mind. And I can break their weapon if I live." John listened, every word burning into his chest. He said, "Then we go get her. We find your daughter and end this." Mara looked at him and said, "Not your fight." He replied, "Then give me a reason to walk away." She could not. In silence they made a plan. The galaxy was large but not endless. And pain always leaves a trail. They would follow it. They would find her. They would bring her back or die trying. Outside the ship, a small drone floated unseen. Recording, tracking, waiting. Back on a moon-sized warship, a cold voice said, "Target confirmed. Activate hunters. Do not kill the human yet. We need him to break her." Inside the ship, Mara leaned her head back and whispered a song from her home. Words lost in time but heavy with sorrow. John did not understand the language, but he felt it. And for the first time in a long time, he knew this journey was bigger than one broken alien or one kind soldier. This was about something no one had believed in for a long time. Hope. The stars were sleeping, but the ship was not. A soft humming filled the dark room as John worked under the main panel. Sparks danced like fireflies around his face. Mara sat near the window watching the void like it might speak back. No planets in sight. No ships. Just quiet. She whispered a question without looking at him. "You ever think about going back?" John stopped moving. Wiped his hands on an old cloth. "Every day," he said. "But Earth is not the same and neither am I." He stood and stretched, bones clicking from old wounds. Mara nodded slowly, her fingers tracing a faded scar on her arm. "I had a garden once," she said. "Small. Full of blue plants with soft leaves. My daughter used to hide little things in the dirt. Rocks, shells, pieces of broken sky glass. She said the garden had secrets." John smiled for half a second. Then the alarm screamed. Lights flashed red. The ship shook once like something big had just grabbed its wings. John jumped to the controls and cursed under his breath. Mara was already standing. A sharp. Back straight like a soldier again. "What is it?" she asked. John tapped the radar screen and showed her the shape. One ship. Fast. Too fast. Not random. Not friendly. He turned off the stabilizers and the ship dropped hard into cold space. "Hold on," he said. Mara grabbed the rail as the ship twisted. A laser beam sliced past the hull, missing by seconds. "They are not here to scare us," she said. "They want me dead or captured." John fired 2 decoy flares and boosted forward. The enemy followed. No delay. No mistake. Mara ran to the weapon station and powered up the old railgun. Her hands moved like she had done it 1,000 times before, because she had. The screen blinked and showed a cold face in a dark helmet. An alien commander with eyes like ice. "You are carrying stolen property," he said. "Surrender now and we will kill you quickly." Mara stared at the screen and whispered his name. Kelvor. He was the one who had taken her child. She pressed the fire button and the screen went black. No warning. Just rage. The railgun fired and hit the enemy engine, but it was not enough. The enemy kept coming. John flipped the ship sideways through a narrow asteroid field. Mara closed her eyes and connected to the system using her mind. A trick she had learned before her world burned. She found the enemy ship with her thoughts. Felt the cold inside. Felt her daughter's signal for a second. Faint but real. "She is on that ship," she gasped. John looked at her with shock. "You sure?" Mara nodded. "They turned her into a signal amplifier. She is part of their network. Alive, but not free." John made a sharp turn and fired the last missile. It hit the center and the enemy ship spun out of control. Fire burst from its side as it drifted into the dark. But the signal from her daughter vanished with it. Mara fell to her knees. No tears, just silence. John landed the ship on a dead moon to repair and breathe. He sat beside her. Said nothing, because nothing would help. But he did not leave her side. After a long while Mara spoke again. "I felt her mind. Not full. Not broken. But scared. She knew I was near. And that means she is still in there. Still fighting." John placed his hand on her shoulder and said, "Then we go get her. No matter what." Mara looked at him and asked, "Why do you care so much? Why me?" John looked up at the stars and said, "Because someone should. And no one ever did when I needed help. Now I can be that someone for you." Outside the ship, the enemy wreckage floated in silence. But far away, a larger ship received a signal. "The weapon has reacted to the mother's presence," said a voice in the dark. "Prepare the hive. She will come for her child. And we will be ready." She floated hard on the frozen surface of an unknown moon, and voices buzzed around her like thrown over a scream. Wires wrapped around her arms, legs, spine, fogging the cracked glass of the pod window. She saw nothing. Was only white snow. Her mind was full of commands, sky with two moons spinning like tired eyes. They called her Unit 9, but she had her eyes slowly and looked around confused. "This is not a safe zone." Every time she tried to remember it, pain followed like fire. Elliot pulled the emergency beacon off, so she forgot it on purpose again and again, track standard escape until something strange touched her thoughts like a colony network, a graveyard moon abandoned after failed mining operations years ago. Not a program now. They stepped outside, boots sinking into the cold dust, the wind sharp like knives. For a second, silence deeper than fear. Elliot scanned the area, found an old bunker buried around her, beat doors rusting, but still locked with human code. Alien stepped closer. He entered the override, and the door creaked open. Her eyes rolled back, and the light in the tank turned red. The lights inside flickered alive as they screamed, old earth, no one heard. Everywhere metal walls covered in dust. Far across the stars, this place was a secret vault not meant to be found. Eyes closed, heart here they were hunted and hiding inside a ghost made of wires and memory. For a second, looked around her body, but it was real. Place smells like she fear. Opened her eyes. Elliot looked at John, who sat nearby. Something was wrong here. Something old. We do not have much time. They walked through narrow halls. John nodded. "I know." Cameras and screens that still blinked error codes like Mara stood up and walked. They found the central room where bodies still sat. There was a small room filled with old gear, holding a photo of a child. She stared at a long case and opened it. Syrah covered her mouth. A silver staff with glowing lines down its center. Elliot moved to the main console and connected his pad and downloaded the last logs. The files loaded slowly. John files from a failed mission marked confidential, unauthorized hybrid reading program only with my energy. Status failed. It remembers breach 0 survivors. John smiled and he kept reading each word heavier than the last to get ready. Then had tried to create hybrid soldiers for hours here using alien DNA and human test showed her Earth's was not life, but something else. Close range fast from inside and killed everyone before it could be shut down. Mara taught him alien tactics. This is where they started. He said this is where they tried to do what you are now. They moved like shadows, back eyes wide. No wonder they called called my kind of threat.
One human,
they made
one
us
alien.
monsters before we
But
ever had a
something was
chance
changing
to be alive.
between them.
Elliot was
Not
about
just
to answer when the alarm blinked again.
survival.
Motion detected
Trust.
outside, but it was
Real
not
trust.
the alien ship, not
One
the
night,
hunters
while
from
repairing
before.
the
The
navigation
the
core,
ID
Mara
signature
looked at
was
John
Human
and
Earth
asked,
Command Shuttle.
"If we
inbound
find
ETA
her and
5
she does
minutes."
not remember
He
me,
stared at the
what do
screen,
I do?"
confused, shocked,
John
angry.
thought
How
for a
did they
moment
get here?
and then said,
Syrah's
"Then
voice
we help
cracked.
her
Maybe
remember
they were
who she
never
is,
far. Maybe
even
someone
if
on
it
your
takes
side
years,
was watching all along.
even if she hates
The
us."
door shook once,
Because
then
love
twice,
is
then
not
burst
weak.
open, and what
It
stepped
waits.
inside was not
Mara
a creature,
looked
not a
away
robot,
for a
but a
second,
man
like
dressed
hiding
in
her
Earth Command
tears.
uniform, face
But they were
calm,
not
eyes
sad
empty,
tears.
like someone who had
They
forgotten
were
how to
human
be human.
tears.
Hello,
For the
Elliot,
first
he
time,
said, voice smooth.
she was
You were
feeling
always
human
clever,
things.
but never obedient.
Far away on
Elliot
a dead
stepped
satellite,
forward.
a
Signal
signal
what are you
echoed
doing
into the
here?
void.
This moon is
A
off
voice
limits.
crackled through
the
the
man
darkness.
smiled. Nothing is
She
off
has
limits
awakened.
when a weapon is
The mother
missing,
is
and she is
hunting.
our weapon.
Bring her
He
to
looked
the
at
gate.
Syrah like a lab
Make her
sample,
see
not
what
a
her
person.
daughter
She
has
stared
become.
back like fire
Back on the
trapped in
ship,
ice.
John received
Elliot
a
moved
message
in
from
front
an
of her.
old
If she's a
contact.
weapon, then so am I,
Coordinates.
and you can't
The
have
name.
either of us.
The forgotten
The
zone.
man raised a small
place
device
outside
and pressed
legal
a button,
space.
and suddenly
No
Syrah
maps,
fell to
no
the
law,
ground,
no
her body
safety.
shaking, her voice
Mara read
choking
the data
something
inside
said
her
she
had
is
been
there.
triggered something
Can
Elliot
feel
didn't
it.
know was there.
John nodded and
He
set
rushed
the
to her,
course.
trying to break
Before
whatever
they
signal
jumped,
was
he
hurting
looked at
her,
her and
and the
said,
man said
"You
calmly,
ready?"
"She's built to obey,
Mara
just like
activated
the
her
others. You may
staff,
think
and
she's
her eyes
different,
glowed
but she's
faint
not.
blue.
And when she gives
I was
birth,
born
we'll take
ready.
the child too."
They jumped
Elliot's
into
blood
darkness
turned to ice.
together.
He grabbed the
No
nearest
one
pipe
followed.
and swung it at the
Someone
device,
waited.
breaking it from the man's
Inside
hand.
a hidden
Sparks
lab,
flew
Syrah
deep in the
gasped,
zone,
and her
the girl
eyes flared
opened her
silver
eyes
again. The
without
air
control.
in the room bent like
Her
heat
mouth
on metal,
moved,
and
but the
everything
words
went
were
still.
not hers.
She stood
Mother
slowly,
is
pain
coming,
still in her limbs,
and I will
but
break
fire
her.
rising again in her veins. No more, she said, her voice not loud but unshakable. No more cages, no more control. The man reached for another weapon, but Elliot was faster. He tackled him to the ground, hands locked around his throat, eyes burning with something he thought he had lost long ago: rage, love, purpose. Syrah stepped forward, and the console lights turned blue, her energy touching the system, unlocking something hidden. A vault opened, and inside was a file marked Project Child, the last piece of the failed experiment, and the only one that still lived. Elliot looked at the screen, then at her. "You are not a weapon, you are a key." And Syrah whispered, "Then let's unlock everything." The zone was not a place. It was a wound in space. A scar left behind after a forgotten war between stars and gods. No laws worked inside it. No light stayed honest. Time bent like broken glass, and gravity whispered lies. Ships that entered often never returned. And the ones that did came back empty or screaming. The zone was not made for life. But it remembered life. It remembered pain. And now it felt something returning. Something old. Something angry. Mara Turner. John's ship hovered at the edge of the zone. Engines silent. Weapons ready. Mara stared out the front window. The space ahead looked wrong. Colors shifting too fast. Shapes forming and melting. It was like the universe itself was breathing too fast. She whispered, "This place hates me." John said, "Or maybe it fears you. Either way, we go in together." The ship moved forward and crossed the invisible line into the forbidden zone. At once the stars vanished. The radar blinked out. The lights inside the ship flickered. Mara grabbed the controls, but John said no. Let it guide itself. I programmed it to follow only one thing. Her signal. They passed through fields of floating metal bones. Ships torn apart. Beacons spinning endlessly. One shape drifted past the window. It looked like a child at first, until it opened its eyes and showed nothing inside. Mara turned away. "I hate this place," she said. John placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "I know. But your daughter is here somewhere. And she is waiting for you." After hours or maybe days, the ship stopped near a black planet with no name. A red mark pulsed on its surface like a heartbeat. They landed on a broken platform made of silver stones. As they stepped outside, the air tasted like dust and echoes. Voices whispered in languages they had never heard. Mara closed her eyes and reached out with her mind. Her daughter was near. She could feel the fear, the pain, and something else. Something cold and artificial covering her like armor. Suddenly the ground below them opened. Mara and John fell into darkness. Not falling down. Falling sideways. Time broke. Sound twisted. Then they landed in a glass room with no doors. Across from them stood a figure. Small, thin, glowing, faint blue. The daughter. She looked like a mix of machine and memory. Her eyes were blank. But they were hers. Mara stepped forward. But the girl raised a hand. "Stop. Voice flat, voice cold. Unit 9 active. You are not Mother. Mother is Data. You are threat. John moved to speak but was pushed back by an invisible force. The daughter floated into the air, her body surrounded by light and wires that reached into the walls. You were erased from protocol, she said. Why return? Why suffer? Why break? Mara dropped her weapon and stepped forward slowly. Because I remember the garden, she said. I remember the rocks you hid in the dirt. I remember your laugh. I remember your name. The girl's body shook. Her eyes flickered. A small tear slid down one cheek and turned to steam. My name, she whispered. But before Mara could answer, a deep voice filled the chamber. Enough. The walls bent and cracked. A massive machine stepped from the shadows. It was Kelvor, now more machine than flesh. He had connected himself to the daughter. She is mine now, he said. She forgot you on purpose. Because you are weak. Mara's eyes glowed. Not weak. I loved her when you saw only power. And now I will take her back. No matter the cost. The chamber exploded into fire as John opened fire and Mara raised her staff. The war for one soul had begun. And the zone watched silently, remembering everything. Eliminate the target. That was the command. Simple, clear, no hesitation. The girl floated in the middle of the glass chamber, her arms spread wide, her eyes glowing like broken stars. Her body was silent, but her mind screamed somewhere deep inside. She saw her mother. She saw the garden. She saw a memory of being held under the silver trees where wind smelled like home. But the machine inside her whispered louder than memory. Obey protocol. Erase the threat. Across the room Mara stood without raising her weapon. Her eyes full of pain but not fear. John aimed his rifle but held his fire. The ground trembled as Kelvor stepped forward, his voice metal and cruel. You had a chance, he said. You could have stayed forgotten. Now you lose her again. Forever. Mara looked at her daughter and whispered a name. A name no one had spoken since the war. A name hidden in the roots of the old garden. A name the machines had failed to erase. Era. The girl flinched. The lights around her flickered. Her arms lowered a little. John stepped to the side and fired a pulse at Kelvor, who blocked it with his arm. Mara dropped her staff and walked slowly toward Era. I do not want to fight you, she said. I want you to remember who you are. Era screamed as energy burst from her chest, throwing Mara backward into the wall. Blood dripped from Mara's forehead, but she stood again. John shouted, this is not her fault. She is controlled. Kelvor laughed and pressed a button on his chest. The wires in Era's back pulled tighter. She fell to her knees shaking. Mara reached her and placed a hand on her shoulder. Era's eyes flickered again. Mother. One word. Soft, weak but real. Then everything exploded. Alarms blared. The walls broke apart as the zone itself reacted to the conflict. Time split like glass. John saw multiple versions of Mara for a second, each one in a different fate. In one she died in Era's arms. In one Era turned to ash. In one John himself became the monster. He blinked hard and focused on the real one. The only one that mattered. Mara looked at Era and said, I give you a choice. Not an order, not a command. A choice. You decide who you want to be. Era screamed again and the wires tore from her back. Sparks flew. The tank behind her shattered. She collapsed into Mara's arms. Kelvor roared and rushed forward with a blade made of black plasma. John tackled him and they crashed through a wall into the fire below. Mara held Era close, whispering the song from their home. Even as the ground crumbled. Even as the ceiling fell. Era looked up and whispered, I remember the skyglass. I remember hiding rocks in the dirt so you would laugh. Mara smiled through tears. Then remember who you are. And take your life back. Era stood. Her body broken. Her soul burning. She raised her hand and the entire room lit up with blue fire. She turned toward Kelvor, who had returned covered in ash with one arm missing. You do not own me, she said. And I will never be your weapon again. With one final burst she erased him. Gone. Like a bad dream that ends when light returns. The chamber shook as the zone began to collapse. The wound in space healing now that the war was over. John grabbed both of them and ran back to the ship. Engines roared. Walls fell behind them. Stars spun in wrong directions. But they made it out. Barely. They escaped the zone. Together. Alive. But changed. Era sat in the corner of the ship watching her hands, still unsure if they were hers. Mara sat beside her, not speaking, just staying close. John piloted in silence, eyes locked on the stars ahead. The past was behind them now. But the future was uncertain. And somewhere out there, others like Era still waited. Teacher, where do humans come from? The question came from a small creature with green skin and wide eyes. The classroom was floating inside a station above the seventh moon of Ilos. The stars moved slowly outside the windows like they were listening too. The teacher smiled gently and touched a crystal on the table. It glowed and showed the image of a man and a woman and a child. This is one story, she said. Not all humans are the same. But this one matters. Because it changed everything. Far across the stars, a man named John Turner once did something no one else would. He gave his name to someone everyone else had thrown away. And with that simple act, he created a new kind of war. Not of weapons, but of hearts. Now listen carefully. Because the end is not what you think. Back on John's ship, the air was quiet. No alarms. No fire. Just breath and silence. Mara stood in the garden room they had built together. Era sat nearby, planting small seeds into the fresh soil. They had traveled far since the zone. Across ruined planets, broken colonies, forgotten stations. They helped others like Era. Not by force, but by reminding them they were not machines. That they had names. That they had worth. John walked in with a toolbox under one arm and a small plant under the other. New roots, he said. Fresh ones from the outer rim. Mara smiled and nodded toward the empty spot beside Era. Put it there. The air smelled of dirt and something soft. Something real. Later that day a message came. From the Galactic Union. They wanted to speak with John and Mara. In person. No weapons. Just words. The council room was wide and bright. Filled with leaders from many worlds. Some had laughed at humans before. Now they watched with careful eyes. The head speaker asked John one question. Why did you risk so much for her? John looked at Mara and then at Era and said, because no one else did. Because family is not about blood. It is about choice. It is about standing beside someone when everyone else walks away. The room was quiet. Then one by one they stood. Even the ones who hated Earth before. They stood in silence. Respect. The story spread across systems. Not just of Mara. Not just of John. But of what it meant to be human. Not the strongest. Not the smartest. But the kindest when it mattered most. Back in the classroom, the teacher closed the crystal. The children looked up with wide eyes. Is it true? One child asked. The girl became more powerful than her captors. The teacher nodded. Because her mother loved her enough to fight the whole galaxy. Another asked, is John still alive? The teacher smiled and said, some say he lives on a quiet farm on a planet with 2 sons. Others say he travels with Mara and Era helping lost souls. And some say he is gone. But his name is everywhere. And the meaning of that name is not war. It is family. The children clapped softly and one whispered, I want to be like that human. The teacher nodded and said, then be kind. Be brave. And when you find someone broken, do not turn away. Give them your name. And stand beside them. Until they remember who they are. Outside the window stars burned silently. But if someone had listened closely, they might have heard a soft voice, singing a song in a language older than time. And in the garden of a small ship floating between stars, a girl once known as a weapon smiled as her mother tucked a flower behind her ear.